Welcome to part 2 of covering what every BSD ability is based on. This time I'll be discussing the Port Mafia. Let's get into it. Rashomon. In reality, the Rashomon was this massive structure built as an entrance to a section of Kyoto in the 8th century. It's called a gate, but it was actually more like a building. After being hit by a storm and never being repaired, it became a hideout for criminals and a place to dump bodies before being completely destroyed. Akutagawa wrote a short story released in 1915 titled Rashomon that centers around a laid-off servant ending up at the gate. The servant stands below the gate, sheltering from the pouring rain. With nowhere to go and nothing to eat, he began to decide if he should just rob someone to avoid starving to death. After deciding he does want to live, he heads inside the gate to rest and prepare to rob someone. While he expected to find dead bodies inside, he wasn't expecting to see an old lady plucking the hairs from corpses of women as well. Seeing the scene as an act of evil, he grabs the woman and pins her to the ground, yelling at her to tell him what she's doing. She says she's simply making wigs to sell for food. After calming down a bit, the servant listens to her whole story, about how she's doing the right thing to survive, and the dead people also did similar immoral acts when they were alive. He then says, by that logic, it's also alright if I rob you. He then steals the lady's clothes off her back and runs out of the gate into the night. Doesn't that story sound kind of familiar? It makes me think of the very first scene of BSD, minus the creepy old lady and actual crime. While we're on the topic, I'm also including this here. Akutagawa's sister in BSD, Gin, also comes from one of his short stories, titled O Gin. After her parents died without knowing Christianity, Gin was adopted by a Christian couple and baptized into the church. One Christmas, Satan himself came to torment the family, taking them prisoner and torturing them all until they revoked their loyalty to the Lord. All three refused this. The other townsfolk believed they had all gone mad and decided it would be best to have them executed. Right before the execution, they were given one last chance to abandon the Lord. There was silence before one spoke up, Gin. She realized that her parents, who had died without knowing Christianity, would have to live in hell forever, and that she would rather be with her family in hell than live alone in heaven. Out of compassion for their adopted child, the couple also decided to join her and thus all succumbed to Satan's temptation. For the Tainted Sorrow, one of Chuyu's real poems, published in 1934. The poem is a description of how he views loss. It's quite depressing, really. The chant he uses when activating his corrupted form is also a part of a real poem, titled Sheep Song, which is then also where the name for the sheep comes from. Flawless. The real title of a story. It follows a young woman who decides she wants to get married. After using a matchmaking service, she's set up on a date with a man in glasses. He showed up late and drunk to their date, but nonetheless she agreed to the engagement. For months before the wedding, when they went on dates, he would get lost, plan poorly, and forget everything, including money. He spent more time drinking with his friends than with her, and even asked her to loan him money. Everyone around her said that it was just his personality, making her feel like she was wrong for being annoyed about it. Somehow, through what I could only describe as pure delusion, she realized she likes him enough to go through with the wedding and even has his kid. For years, she tries to make him into a distinguished man, but he only gets worse and worse. For some reason, she never gives up on him and the guy never leaves either, so good for them, I guess. Midwinter Memento. Was I the only one who didn't know Tachihara's ability actually had a name? Well, it does, and it's a real poem too. Many of Tachihara's poems focus on portraying the emotions of a particular landscape. This one is no different, describing the still, all-encompassing feeling of a barren winter scene. Fallen Camellia. Asagiri must have pulled it together for the Port Mafia because this is once again the real title of a book released in 1894. I'll be honest, I can't find a copy of it, but based on some Japanese blogs, it seems to be a very depressing story, particularly about the lives of people who are poor, which is pretty typical for Hirotsu's works. The name of Hirotsu's group in BSD, the Black Lizard, is also the title of one of his books, released in 1895. It tells the story of a man's seventh wife. She is constantly tormented by her father-in-law, but tries to put up with it for the sake of her marriage. She and her husband end up having a child, and she decides that for the sake of the child, it would be best to get rid of her father-in-law. She does this by poisoning him before she commits via a jump into a well. Golden Demon. The title of a novel that was published periodically in a newspaper over 5 years, but was never truly completed as Koyo actually died before it was fully published in 1903. The finale was written by a different person, his student Fuyo Oguri. This one is long, so here's a highly abridged version. It follows the story of Kanichi, an incredibly hardworking but low-class orphan. We first meet him just before his marriage to a beautiful woman named Mia. While they do like each other, both Mia and her family would prefer for her to marry someone rich. At a party, she meets a rich guy, they break off their marriage and she gets with him. 4 years later, Kanichi has gone off the rails and become a loan shark, with absolutely no interest in other people, just trying to become rich. It also turns out the rich guy wasn't a good person, as he both abuses and cheats on Mia. Now that Kanichi has gone insane, his friend Arao tries to find him. Arao basically ends up with a lot of debt. There's also this girl called Mitsue. She's also married to a really rich guy, was abused by him and absolutely lost it too, and is now known as one of the most powerful femme fatale style women in the area. So Mitsue likes Kanichi, but Kanichi is nothing but an ass to her. Arao eventually finds his friend where he also meets Mitsue. Mia still likes Kanichi and begs him to take her back, but he obviously rejects her. She tries to off herself and ends up in a mental hospital. A lot of stuff goes on while all that happens, and Kanichi realizes he's been a dickhead this whole time. He ends up using all the money he made from his loan sharking to pay off Arao's debt and helps him move to France. After her husband's death, Mitsue kind of pulls it together and ends up following Arao to France. Kanichi then goes to find Mia and they end up living together, although Mia is completely broken, only able to say Kanichi's name. Lemon. Published in 1924, Lemon is a real short story and also the name of a collection of short stories. In the story itself, we are introduced to a guy whose life has fallen apart. He was quite well off, with his hobby being shopping for art books at a department store, but now he was broke and spent his time aimlessly wandering the street. One of his favourite places to visit is a fruit vendor. He usually doesn't buy anything, but today they were selling lemons, so he buys one. He sniffs it, and the scent clears his mind, enough to give him the confidence to go back to his favourite department store. While searching through art books, he realizes the activity doesn't make him happy like it did before. He remembers the lemon he has in his pocket and places it atop a stack of art books. The sight of it causes him pure joy. Vita Sexualis, a semi-true novel of Mori's experience with sexuality released in 1909. It was actually banned by the Japanese government shortly after its publication. The narrator is a professor who wants to understand the psychology of sexuality and especially why men are expected to participate in it while he remains uninterested. It goes through a recount of all the major explicit events in his life and also explores the world of professionals in Japan, from printed media to geishas to secretive businesses and even arranged marriage. It's really important to stress that this book isn't meant to be like smut or whatever at all. It's like an objective look at his past and how Japan's at the time views around sexuality were very conservative, but it was also expected for everyone to participate in it. I feel like the title and Mori's character can kind of give you the wrong impression. Like Gin, Elise also comes from one of Mori's short stories, 1890's Dancing Girl. A Japanese man goes to Germany and falls in love with a poor girl who dances in the streets for money. He has to choose between staying with her or returning to Japan for his job. He chooses his job. However, Elise was pregnant, and his leaving made her go insane, resulting in her having to live in a mental hospital. She has their child, and the man sends money from Japan to support her, but never sees her again. Dogra Magra, a real novel published in 1935. It's actually known for being one of the most insane Japanese detective novels to ever exist. We open on our main character waking up in a mental asylum with no memories. According to the doctor there to manage him, the doctor who was meant to manage him committed before this, so he's taking over. The doctor takes him to the dead doctor's office every day and lets him look through all his stuff to try and piece together his missing memories. Simple plot, really. Except not really. The main guy's had some probably super illegal experiments done to him, and throughout the whole book you are never really sure if the memories he's trying to get back are even really his. If those memories are his, then that's no good because that would mean he's murdered 2 people. You can't believe what anyone says, people who are meant to be dead aren't, kind of. Honestly, was there even a mystery in the first place? The supposed conclusion is that the main character was an experiment done between the doctor and dead doctor to decide once and for all if people have any control over their mind, which concludes with they do not. It's also revealed that the main guy technically doesn't even exist yet, maybe. Does anyone actually want to see me cover the Guild, or maybe just a collection of the other Japanese authors? Let me know. Thank you for your time.